Welcome to round 1 of our Pioneer Tournament. Our match 1 is Gruul versus Black-White Auras. The Black-White Auras player here is mulliganing down to 5 and decides to tuck 2, and we begin our match. They play a tap shock land and pass the turn. We've got a game trail revealing a forest, followed by a Land Over Elves. Passing the turn, they untap, draw, and pass the turn with nothing to do. The Gruul player plays a land, taps for 3, and throws out a Jadelight Ranger, exploring a land to hand and exploring a Paradise Druid to the bin. They pass the turn. Black-White player draws, finds an Eidolon, and drops it. The Gruul player plays their 3rd land and gets rid of the Eidolon with Burn from Within, dealing 2 damage to it and exiling it, then attacking for 4. Passing the turn, they untap and pass back, unable to find their 2nd land. Gruul player drops their 4th land, shocking it in, attacks for 3, drops a Phoenix, holds up a mana, and passes the turn. The Black-White player finds a land, taps 2, drops a SRAM, which is answered by a Magma Spray. Gruul player untaps, goes to combat, swings for 9, and drops another Phoenix. Playing a tap land, passing the turn, which causes the Black and White player to scoop it up. Going to game 2. Looks like both players have kept a 7. We see a fast land dropped by the Black-White player, followed by another Eidolon. Gruul player drops a shock land, taps it for a Land Over Elves, and passes the turn. They untap, draw. And we see a 2nd land, followed by a Cartouche, which will give it a 1/1. And another Cartouche, followed by 2 1/1s. The Black-White player goes to combat and swings for 3 damage in the air, lifelink, and passes the turn. Gruul player untaps, drops down a land, and hits it with an Abrade and a Magma Spray, exiling the card, causing the death effect to fizzle. Passing the turn, they untap, plays the 3rd land, taps 2 for a SRAM and a Griff Spoon, causing SRAM to trigger, drawing a card. They attack for 2 damage, Vigilance with the tokens. And we pass to the Gruul player's turn. They drop a 3rd land and play a Struggle on the SRAM, removing it from the battlefield. Passing the turn, go to the Black-White player. They drop their 4th land and decide to tap all 4 to bring back the Griff Spoon attached to one of the tokens. They go to combat and swing for 3 Vigilance. No blocks declared by the Gruul player, and they pass the turn. They drop their 4th land as well, tapping 4 for a Rekindling Phoenix, and passes the turn, holding mana up again. We go back to the Black-White player. They tap 1 for a Sentinel Eyes on the token, 2 mana for an All That Glitters. In response, the Gruul player taps and plays a Magma Spray, removing the token. The Black-White player drops the last card in their hand, which is a Griff Spoon, onto their token, and then ships the turn. Gruul player untaps and draws. Pays 4, opting to not use his Land Over Elves, and plays a Ballista on 2. And attacks 4/4 in the air. Passes the turn. Black-White player untaps. Brings back the Sentinel Eyes. exiling 2 cartouches. Ballista is activated. In response, a blessing is played. In response, the ballista is triggered again, removing the token from combat. From the battlefield, sorry. Phoenix goes in, dealing 4, and another Phoenix is played. The black-white player passes back, finding no gas, no action. A game trail is played tapped, and 9 damage is sent through, dropping the black-white player down to 6. Gruul player taps 2 and plays Paradise Druid, also empty-handed. The black-white player finds a SRAM to play. Taps 1, losing a life technically, for a Sentinel's Eyes, exiling 2 cards from his bin and drawing a card. Finds a Gideon off the trials. Tanks for a moment and decides to concede the game, and that is the end of round 1. Heading into round 2, we've got Rakdos aggro against Izzet Phoenix. Rakdos is on the play, shocks in a land, taps it for a Stitcher Supplier, milling a few cards into the bin. Got Scrounger, Mayhem Devil, and Croxa, and ships the turn. Izzet player draws. Drops the untapped Steam Vents and ships the turn, examining the Rakdos player's graveyard. Rakdos plays their second land, attacks with the Stitcher Supplier, and drops a Scrounger post-combat and ships the turn. Izzet plays Opt on the end step, keeping on top and drawing it. Untaps and goes to draw step. Play a second Steam Vents, paying 2, and drops a Young Pyromancer. Go to the Rakdos player's turn. They untap, draw. Drop their third land, shocking it in. Drops a Claim the Firstborn, stealing the Pyromancer. Follows that up with a Thoughtseize, triggering the Young Pyromancer and getting a elemental token. For the Thoughtseize, they pick Treasure Cruise, setting it to the bin. And goes to combat, attacking for 6. They post-combat play the Witch's Oven, sacking the Pyromancer and creating a food token. And ships the turn. Izzet players untaps and draws, and decides to play a Strategic Planning. They keep a card and put the other 2 cards into the bin. They play another land. And ships the turn. Rakdos player goes in for damage, attacking for 5. Before damage, a Lightning Axe cast on the Scrounger, discarding a Phoenix. And the Izzet player takes 2. Post-combat, Rakdos player sacks the Stitcher Supplier to make a food, and mills the top 3 cards of their library. Mayhem Devil, Fabled Passage, and Mountain goes to the bin. Shock on a land, pay 4, and comes Croxa, exiling some cards from their bin. The Izzet player discards Tormenting Voice, avoiding the 3 damage. They untap and draw. Go for a Treasure Cruise, discarding 7 cards from their library, and draws 3. They follow it up by Strategic Planning, looking at the top 3 cards of their library, keeping 1 and discarding 2. They follow this up with a Lightning Axe, discarding a Phoenix, targeting the elemental token. Elemental dies, they go to combat and brings back 2 Phoenix from their bin. Goes to declare his attacks and hits with 1 Phoenix, leaving 1 back as a blocker. Ships a turn, Rakdos player untaps, draws, plays their 5th land, and attacks with Kroxa. Kroxa attack triggers. The Izzet player discards a land and takes 3, and chump blocks with their Phoenix. The Rakdos player ships a turn. Izzet player untaps, draws. Starts with a Charter Course, draws 2. Discards the island. Follows it up with an Opt. Goes to Scry. Tanks for a moment. Decides to keep it and plays another Opt. Goes to Scry. Puts it to the bottom. Drawing a card. Goes to combat. Brings back the Phoenix. And declares attack with 1 Phoenix. Rakdos player in response brings back a Scrounger. Well, it seems to be after damage. And another Scrounger, exiling 2 Mayhem Devils from the bin. And untaps and goes to draw, but the Izzet player realizes this is lethal and scoops it up. Heading to game 2, the Izzet player starts us off with a tapped shock land and passes the turn. Rakdos draws their card. Drops a swamp, followed by a Witch's Oven and passes the turn. Izzet player untaps and draws. Drops a Spire Bluff Canal and plays a Strategic Planning. Opting to pick for the Opt and puts 2 cards in the bin. Passing the turn, Rakdos player draws. Drops a Dragon Skull Summit. Taps a swamp for a Cauldron Familiar, which has an ETB trigger, causing the cat to drain for 1 life. It has no follow plays and passes turn. Izzet player untaps, draws. Drops their 3rd land and passes turn, which causes the Cauldron Cat loop to happen from the Rakdos player, draining yet another life. Rakdos player draws. Plays their 3rd land. Goes to combat and hits with the Cauldron Familiar. Rakdos player taps 2 for a Scrounger. Passes the turn. On end step, Brazen Borrower is flashed in. Untap, draw. Izzet player attacks in for 3. Taps 2 to play a Young Pyromancer. Plays their 4th land. And plays a Charter Course and draws 2. Making an elemental token. Cat loop happens on end step. However, the food is left in the bin. A Mayhem Devil is played by the Rakdos player, followed by a Fabled Passage. They sack the food to bring back the cat. Targets the Young Pyromancer, sending it to the graveyard. The ETB for the cat is resolved. Fabled Passage is cracked, causing the Mayhem Devil to trigger again, targeting the Elemental. Rakdos player finds a mountain, puts it into play. Taps the red for a Claim the First board, targeting the Brazen Borrower. Goes to combat, attacks for a whole bunch of damage. 6 in fact. And post-combat, sacks the Brazen Borrower for a food token. And ships the turn. Izzet player untaps, draws their card, starts us off with an Opt, decides to keep the card on top and draws it, follows up with a Lightning Axe on the Mayhem Devil, discarding a Phoenix, And third spell for the turn is a Treasure Cruise, exiling 7 cards from their bin and drawing 3. Play their 5th land, goes to combat and brings back the Phoenix. Leaves it back for blocks and passes the turn. Rakdos player draws, taps 3 for a Midnight Reaper, and attacks with a Scrap Heap Scrounger and a Cauldron Familiar. Before blocks, a Petty Theft is cast, bouncing the Midnight Reaper back to hand. And the Phoenix is sent forward to trade with the Scrounger, and 1 damage is taken. Post-combat, another Oven is dropped, and the turn is shipped. The turn is shipped, the Izzet player draws a card, taps 2 for a Pyromancer, taps another 2 for a Pyromancer, then taps 2 for a Charter Course, making 2 elemental tokens. Draws 2, discards a Phoenix into the bin, and passes turn. Cat Loop is completed, twice in fact, putting the Izzet player to 3 life. A Stitches Suppliers is dropped, binning 3 cards, a Mountain, a Fatal Push, and a Chandra. After that, a Midnight Reaper that was bounced last turn is played back into the battlefield, and the Cauldron Familiar goes in for combat. It's blocked by an Elemental and traded, and the Rakdos player loses a life and draws a card, but the cat is looped twice, letting the Izzet player know that they've dropped to 0 life. This takes us to round 3, where we have Boros aggro versus our Gruul player from round 1. Since we had 10 players in this tournament, that we have some pairs up and paired down, and the Rakdos player we just saw was paired down in round 3. We start us off with a Game Trail with a tapped Shock, goes to turn 2, and we've got a Paradise Druid coming down. A second land is played by the Boros player, followed up with nothing, and the turn is shipped. Third land comes down. 4 mana is tapped for a Ballista X equals 2. Before the turn ends, it is met with an Abrade, and the Boros player takes 2 to the face. Boros player untaps and draws, drops a tap land, and plays out a Heart of Crown. Gruul player untaps, taps 4 for a Phoenix, and passes the turn. Boros player plays their 4th land, taps 2 mana for a Declaration of Stone. The Gruul player gets a Clue token, and they ship the turn. Gruul player drops their 4th land, cracks the Clue, draws a card, and pays 2 for a Paradise Druid, and ships the turn. A 5th land is played by the Boros player. 2 mana is tapped for a Spirit of the Labyrinth, followed up with a Collect Defiance, opting to make the Gruul player discard their hand and only draw 1 card thanks to the Spirit of the Labyrinth. Crews the Heart of Crown and attacks for 4 in the air, and ships the turn. Gruul player untaps, goes in for 4, and passes the turn, playing their 5th land tapped. Boros player drops their 6th land, followed up by Hazoret, which causes the Gruul player to scoop it up, and we go to game 2. Game 2, Boros player has mulligan down to 5. Game Trail is played with a land revealed. Tap land is played, we go to the next turn. 2 mana, we see our Paradise Druid yet again. Boros player plays out their 2nd land and passes the turn. Gruul player plays their 3rd land and drops a turn 3 Chandra, ticking it up to exile the top card and dealing 2 damage to the Boros player. Passes turn. Boros player plays their 3rd land and passes the turn. We've got the Gruul player plays their 4th land, ticks up Chandra, exiling the top card, finding a Walking Ballista, plays it only X equals 1, attacks in for 2, and then passes the turn. Boros player plays their 4th land, dropping in a Chandra of their own. Chandra ticks up. Takes on the top card. Declaration Stone. The Gruul player takes 2 damage. Gruul player untaps. Ticks up Chandra for 2 red mana. Adds 2 more to it, activating the Ballista. And attacks the Chandra for 4. Activates the Ballista again to kill the Chandra completely. And the turn is passed. Boros player draws. Finds their 5th land. Taps 2 for Declaration Stone. It resolves, and a clue token is made. And Thalia is dropped. On end step, the clue token is cracked to draw a card, and the Gruul player untaps. Gruul player ultimates Chandra, follows it up with yet another Chandra, dealing 5 damage to their opponent. Ticks up the Chandra for 2 red mana, throws in a Braid for the Thalia, dealing another 5 damage to the Boros player. Taps the Paradise Druid for 1 green, dropping a Llanowar Elves and dealing 5 damage to the Boros player, and passes the turn. Nothing else, the Boros player scoops it up, and we go to our final game of the day. Boros player starts with a tap land and passes. We see a game trail with a land revealed, followed up by Llanowar Elves. Boros player plays a second land and scries 2. And puts both to the bottom. Gruul player plays another game trail, same land revealed, taps for 3, and plays a Jadelight Ranger, exploring twice. First explorer is a land, second explorer is a Llanowar Elves that hits the bin. Boros player untaps, plays their 3rd land, taps for 3, and drops a Thalia. Declares no attacks and passes the turn. Gruul player untaps, draws, drops a Forest, pays for 3 for a Lifecrafter's Bestiary, and ships the turn. Boros player untaps, finds their 4th land, taps 4 for a Click Defiance, killing the Jadelight Ranger and dealing damage to face. They go to combat, swing with both, and the Thalia is met with a Magma Spray. Passes the turn. After the Gruul player takes 3 life, we go to the upkeep scry. Gruul player keeps it on top and draws a card. Plays their 4th land and ships the turn. Boros player untaps, draws their card, and plays out Collective Defiance number 2, killing the Llanowar Elves and causing the Gruul player to discard and draw a new hand. In response, the Gruul player plays out on a Braid, destroying the Motorist, and discards 3 lands and just draws 3 more cards from the library. With nothing else, the Boros player passes the turn. We go to the upkeep scry. It's kept on top, and we see a Chandra coming down. Ticks up, finds a shock land, shocking the opponent, and passes the turn. Boros player untaps, draws, and passes the turn with nothing else to do. Gruul player goes to the upkeep scry, tucks it away to the bottom, and ticks up the Chandra for 2 red, and drops down a Carnage Tyrant, and ships the turn. On end step, we see Boros Charm dealing 4 damage to Chandra, and they go to upkeep draw. Nothing else, the Boros player passes the turn. Go to the upkeep scry, which is left on top. We start off with combat, and the Carnage Tyrant is settled to the wreckage. Gruul player finds a green tapped, and goes to the post combat, drops a Llanowar Elves, and pays for the Lifecrafter's Bestiary trigger and draws a card. Drops their land for turn, ticks up Chandra, exiling the top card, it's another Chandra, and the opponent is shocked for 2. The turn is shipped, the Boros player untaps, draws, and pays 2 for a Boros Charm, getting rid of that Chandra, and ships the turn. Gruul player untaps, draws, scrying at the upkeep, keeps it on top, and puts it into hand. We see 5 mana dropped, 1 mana paid for the Lifecrafter Bestiary trigger, and 5 damage is declared onto the Boros opponent, and a Stomping Ground is shocked in. Boros player untaps, draws, pays 4 for a Nahiri, which minuses and exiles the Glory Bringer. And ships turn. Gruul player untaps, upkeep Scry, it's kept on top, the card is drawn. And 4 mana is paid for a Phoenix, and an extra is paid for a card draw trigger off the Lifecrafter's Beastry. And 1 damage is declared to Nahiri. And the turn is shipped. Boros player untaps. Cards drawn. 3 mana is tapped for a Anger of the Gods, exiling both the Phoenix and the Llanowar Elves. Nahiri is ticked up, but no card is discarded. Gruul player untaps, scries. The card is kept in the top, and we see a Glorybringer with the Lifecrafter Beastry trigger paid, and a card is drawn. Nahiri goes down, and the turn is shipped. Boros player untaps, draws, finds their 5th land. 2 mana is paid for a Heart of Crown, followed up by 2 mana for a Declaration Stone, giving the Gruul player a clue token. Turn shipped. Go to the Scry, it's put to the bottom, and then we draw. 3 mana is paid for Jadelight Ranger, the Lifecrafter Beastry is paid on cast, so they draw a card. We explore twice. The first explore is a land, the second explore is a Shadow Spear, which is left on top. 1 counter for the Jadelight Ranger. Turn is shipped. Boros player untaps, draws. Tapped 4 for a Hazoret, decides to crew the Heart of Crown, and goes to combat 4 in the air with Vigilance. For 4 damage, an Abrade is cast, killing the Heart of Crown, and on end step the clue token is cracked for a card draw. On the upkeep Scry, the card is drawn. The Gruul player plays out Shadow Spear, equipping it to the Jadelight Ranger, and declares attack 4 power lifelink. Boros player takes it down to 5, the Gruul player goes up to 16, and the turn is shipped. Boros player draws, pays 2 for a Veteran Motorist, scrying 2. Both cards are put to the bottom, and attacks are declared. Shadow Spear is activated, and Magma Spray and Abrade are both cast on Hazoret, who no longer has Indestructible. The turn is shipped. Gruul player untaps, scries, keeps it on top, plays out a Forest, followed by a Paradise Druid, which is paid for by the trigger and draws a card, followed by another Paradise Druid, where the green is paid and a card is drawn. We go to combat, where the Jadelight Ranger is declared as an attacker. The Boros player decides to trade, and they both die. But the Gruul player gains 4. Post combat, 3 mana is paid, and a Lifecrafter's Beastry number 2 is dropped onto the battlefield, and the turn is shipped. Boros player draws, pays for 3 mana for an Anger of the Gods. Both Paradise Druids go to exile, and passes the turn. Gruul player untaps, goes to the Scry, keeps it on top, plays out a Game Trail, revealing a mountain, and taps all his lands for a burn from within for 9 damage to face. And we have it. Our first Pioneer Cup is over, won by Gruul.
Today's video is brought to you by Magic at Willis. Use the code Accumulated Knowledge to get 5% off your next order. Link available in the description box below.